Jesse's there, good,
Yep.
okay. So, Mr. Furman,
Present.
Counselor Tabor,
Here.
Mr. Lynch,
Here.
and Chair White is here. Attorney,
And
excuse me.
the deputy city manager is here in her capacity as deputy on behalf of the city manager.
And Attorney Sullivan.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, first off, I'd like to approve the May 11th public session minutes, please. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes.
Seconded? Do I have a second, please? Jesse?
I will second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
it does seem to me the minutes are incomplete. You've quoted yourself and no other members of the committee. Extensive minuting of the public comments, but at 28:10, or 28:50, we had Deputy City Manager Woodland responding to some of the public comment, and at 42:10, we had my comments. You also had Jesse's comments. None of those are in the minutes. So I would ask that these go back for another turn and include some of the comments if we want a complete record.
I'd be happy to make those additions. Thank you. So we'll table the approval of those minutes.
Sure, the appropriate motion is postpone.
Postpone, thank you.
I would move we postpone approval of the minutes till the next meeting.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Jesse. So the next up is unsealing and releasing non-public audit committee minutes from June 2021 and February 2022. Let me see, was it a day or two ago, I received redacted versions of the February 15 and 24 minutes and the June 29, 2021 minutes. And the redactions that Attorney Woodland and Attorney Sullivan requested for the February 15 and 24 minutes, I find those to be acceptable. They're removing the names of individuals that were quoted in the minutes. So I'd like to break these up into two pieces if I could, and do first the February 15 and 24 with the redactions as indicated by Attorney Woodland. So if I could get a motion, please, for that.
Mr. Chairman, do we have a copy of
Yeah,
those?
here.
I haven't had a chance to submit. Hawk, have you had a chance to?
Yes. Yeah, I motion.
All set.
So you've read both minutes,
Yes.
or just the 15th, the February?
I have read the 15th and well, the 15th was continued to the 24th, right?
Correct. Yep.
So, yeah.
I'd like to get a motion, please, to unseal those minutes with the redactions as requested by Attorney Woodland. If I could get
Are we on June 29, or are we on?
No, just February 15 and 24.
Flip together.
I move that we.
Thank you. Can I, do I have a second, please?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Regarding the June 29, 2021 non-public session, these I would like to remain sealed because the redactions are so extensive. I move that we leave these June 29, 2021 minutes sealed. Thank you. Any discussion?
I'll have to abstain. I wasn't a member of the committee
Right.
at the time.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Is Jesse in favor?
Jesse, are you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just a,
Okay. So I think that means we don't need to go into non-public. So I'd like to, at this point in the agenda, take the opportunity to make a statement, please. So following the July 11th City Council vote to make the Audit Committee material of the March 7th, 22 non-public City Council meeting public, I am now free to report on that meeting to you. There are several points I wish to make. One, these comments will have direct bearing on the current Governance Committee effort to restructure the Audit Committee, eliminating the role of private citizens who have experience in finance and accounting. And two, they will also have bearing on the request for proposal that we'll be discussing shortly. I refer to a letter I wrote to the City Council on March 17, 22, with comments I wanted to make to the City Council regarding the March 7th, 22 non-public meeting. Consequently, I felt that these comments needed to be made public at the March 21st City Council meeting, given the gravity of the discussion at the March 7th, 22 non-public meeting. The letter I wrote states that the vote, which was 3-0 in favor of retaining CLA as the auditor of the FY22 books. The two councilors, Cook and Tabor, abstained, stating that there were process violations that invalidated the entire Audit Committee work and that they were unable to participate in the vote. This was the first I had heard of their position. At that March 7th, 2022 non-public meeting, as chair of the Audit Committee, I was never permitted to complete the Audit Committee's legal obligation of reporting to City Council the Audit Committee's voted recommendation. Nor were the private citizens of the Audit Committee given the chance to rebut or present the material we prepared for City Council, even though we were the ones with the financial expertise. At the mayor's invitation, Attorney Woodland stood up and assumed that Audit Committee's responsibility. She gave the report for the Audit Committee. There was no council-level discussion of the Audit Committee's work. If we go back to mid-December of 21, that Audit Committee meeting, Attorney Woodland ignored the Audit Committee's RFP and inserted her own. Her RFP compromised the process by making a unilateral offer to Melanson to do the non-attest services prior to the issuance of her RFP on December 16. Without notifying the Audit Committee, she put into the city RFP that Melanson was to do the non-attest services. She did not know the costs Melanson would charge. In fact, this eliminated the chance to put the non-attest services out to competitive bid, potentially violating state guidelines. Attorney Woodland even then put forward that the city staffing was so thin that it could not deal with the demands of a new auditing firm. In fact, the demands of the city staff caused by a new auditor would not change from the previous year's demands. The city staff would prepare the same schedules as they had done previously. But this concern held sway even though a discussion with a CLA reference specifically stated CLA made the transition to the new auditor, i.e. CLA, very easy. Subsequent to the RFP's issuance in mid-December, Melanson quoted $25,000 to Attorney Woodland to do the non-attest work if they did not receive the audit contract. That would drop to $5,000 if they got the audit contract. A $25,000 price tag would exceed purchasing procedure limits by at least $7,000. Attorney Woodland was now under the gun. She had to convince the city council to hire Melanson so she could escape from this self-created conflict and thereby reduce Melanson's non-attest price from $25,000 to $5,000. Attorney Woodland misrepresented that the audit committee found Melanson and CLA were equally qualified and the city council could justifiably hire either auditing firm. Attorney Woodland misrepresented the results of the extensive due diligence conducted once the proposals were received by the audit committee in early February. Attorney Woodland misrepresented the scoring done by the audit committee, stating it was a toss-up. The fact was CLA clearly scored much better, but if you looked only at the scores given by the financially inexperienced counselors, Counselor Tabor and Counselor Cook, it was a toss-up. The two counselors had Melanson winning by 1 or 2 points when Melanson's low price was considered. Attorney Woodland also misquoted the pricing of the two firms. In fact, the three private citizens with much deeper financial experience applying their professional judgment strongly favored CLA's technical and professional strengths, the deeper and better trained staff, and the fact that they would bring fresh eyes to the situation. Please note that Melanson could afford to submit a lower bid because the quality of staffing was so much lower. The scoring by the three private citizens underscored that observation. For example, Melanson lacked the same depth of required technical personnel compared with CLA. Melanson would offer only one CPA and one principal for the engagement compared to 3 CPAs and 3 principals from CLA. Bottom line, CLA was more expensive, but the city would get far more bang for their buck. Such analyses were not considered by Attorney Woodland or apparently by the two counselors. So then came along these alleged process violations by the two counselors using that excuse to abstain from voting for the most qualified proposer, stating that there were process violations that invalidated the entire committee work and that they were unable to participate in the vote. Now, remember that Councilor Tabor then admitted at the March 21 City Council meeting that CLA was, in fact, the most qualified. Based on the conduct by Attorney Woodland and the two counselors, I had formally retained an attorney. Why? I knew I needed to protect my and the committee's reputation, given the city's and the two counselors' apparent goal to destroy the audit committee and all we had achieved. For the counselors to claim any process violations on my part or the committee's was ludicrous. A process must be in writing if it is to be violated, and nothing was written. The city was just making up violations as it went along for purposes of entrapment. For example, I produced detailed notes of my observations comparing the two firms. I shared these with my audit committee colleagues, hoping to generate some conversation and discussion. The counselor said this was another process violation on my part, probably because these notes clearly show the superiority of CLA over Melanson. The counselor cited as another violation my texting principal, Chris Rogers of CLA, to set up a conference call with the audit committee on February 24 to discuss an amended bid that would include non-attest services with the audit work. This would give a semblance of balance necessary to counter Attorney Woodland's mid-December non-competitive offer to Melanson. Why did I text Chris Rogers of CLA? While I was not given the opportunity to defend myself at the non-public meeting, I want to now say that I had grown to not trust Attorney Woodland's ability to get these things done unless the job suited her own objectives and priorities. I was very concerned, knowing how important it was for Attorney Woodland to give Melanson the auditing job, that CLA would not be given the chance to provide an amended bid that included the non-attest work. Therefore, I texted Chris Rogers on February 20th, which was over a long weekend. I wanted to be sure he saw the message by texting him. This was the only way I knew to make certain CLA was given the same timely opportunity as Melanson to submit an amended bid, which they did. From my attorney, quote, based on my understanding, Mr. White reached out to a prospective bidder to ensure that the bidder provided a timely and thorough estimate to the City of Portsmouth by a date certain. Mr. White also informed the prospective bidder that they would be interviewed by the Audit Committee on February 24. This does not constitute a, quote, flaw. On the contrary, it enhances the likelihood that a qualified bidder provides timely and thorough information so that the city can make an informed decision. In fact, what appears to be flawed, and this is from my attorney, is the use of an innocuous communication regarding an information deadline as a pretext to discard the bidding process and award the contract to Melanson. If there were process violations, I submit that perhaps they were committed by the city and the councilors Cook and Tabor. That's not my attorney's opinion, that's mine. Now, let's go back to March 21st. So my letter of March 17th had been received by the city and the councilors. It contained, as I have said, much of what I've described above. I received a call at 3 o'clock that afternoon from Mayor McEachern, City Attorney Sullivan, and Councilor Tabor. Among other topics discussed, Attorney Sullivan threatened me with removal from the Audit Committee or more if I made that letter public. I decided not to make it public that evening at City Council. The next morning, he emailed me thanking me for not making the letter public and promised that things would go more easily for me going forward. I am now grateful to finally get these matters out in the open where they can be given a fair hearing. Upon reflection, I am amazed at the lengths city management, the mayor, and city councilors would abuse their offices to fight the efforts of public citizens to bring in a talented and skilled auditor with fresh eyes to look at the city's books. Why such resistance? Now, I can only imagine that there must be significant deficiencies in the way the city manages its finances. I am also struck by the collusive behavior between city management, the mayor, and the city councilors. The degree to which the Audit Committee's work was directed by the deputy city manager to prevent that fresh set of eyes to look at the books speaks volumes about the city's needs to keep things covered up. Today, the city, I submit, is even further away from conducting an independent audit than it was at the beginning of the calendar year. I understand the city will issue its RFP in another month or so, as it did last year, substituting the Audit Committee's efforts to make the audit more independent. Key among these measures in the Audit Committee's RFP will be the establishment of the Audit Committee as the body to which the auditor will report. The GFOA requires this. This is not just our wishful thinking. It's in the little blue book. Further, there is a need to separate non-attest services from the Audit Committee audit work to remove those obvious conflicts of interest. Our RFP clearly has a separation between audit and non-attest. Finally, the RFP needs to specify the weight given in the scoring for cost versus technical skills. Last year, we used 30% cost as a weight, and the GFOA suggests this number as well. It signals to all the proposers that the Audit Committee puts a strong weight on skills and innovative approaches over simply buying the cheapest bid, which the GFA warns against. If the Governance Committee is successful in restructuring the Audit Committee as it is discussing now, I am fearful that there will be even less independence in the audit process. With no private citizens with financial expertise sitting on the audit committee, the city councilors will look to city management for guidance and advice. This will cause the fox to guard the chicken coop in new and destructive ways. Independent oversight will go away completely. That's the end of my public comments.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to clarify the record a little if I could.
Yeah, please.
You and Jesse and I were at the meeting with the city council that you referenced. I did say there were flaws in the process. I did also agree with the scoring and CLA as top choice, but I did not feel the process would withstand scrutiny. I still feel that. I stand by my vote. And it's not true that you were not allowed to speak to your recommendation. It's also a fact that Jesse was present and also spoke, and I think the council did hear your recommendations. I would note that the audit committee is an advisory committee to the city council. The city council has the responsibility of choosing an auditor. There was another important factor in that meeting, which I referenced in the May 11th meeting of this committee. The city staff did not feel they should take on the work of a new auditor when they had open positions. In fact, as I said May 11th, the city finance department is eager to have an auditor show the quality of work in our financial books when they're fully staffed. And that was a factor in the council's decision, and I think that needs to be part of the record. We had contact between you and one of the bidders discussing price of the non-attest services before the bids, and we had contact by you, innocuous as it may have been, after the bids were opened, and I saw those as flaws in the process. So I'll leave it at that, but I think that I just wanted to clarify the record.
Thank you, Councilor Tabor. I would disagree with your characterization about the non-public meeting. At no point was I invited to stand up and give a counter to what Attorney Woodland had presented. I came prepared with books, in fact, copies of what I finally gave to Mr. Furman. Were passed out, but no one ever asked me to please stand up and address what was in those books. So there was no opportunity for me to counter there at that meeting all of what Attorney Woodland had presented. And I would just point out you're bringing in the conversation I had with CLA in the fall. This was before the RFPs were drafted, before they were issued. We were trying to gather information to find out how reasonable it would be to separate non-attest and audit services. I spoke with several different CPA firms about that. CLAs, as I remember, said they would probably charge between $10,000 and $12,000. And that was about in line with what BDO and other firms would charge. So it was simply information gathering. But if that becomes a process violation, then the risk we run, Councilor Tabor, is that the city is flying blind, and that is a grievous error in management decision.
I think we'll continue that discussion at the Governance Committee.
I look forward to that. Attorney Woodland, did you want to say anything?
I'll just be brief and say I have disagreements with your accounts, and I don't think we should be having, portions of this conversation, given that we're about to go out for a new RFP, and we'd like to see a broad interest in the new RFP. So I'm disappointed that we've gone into this level of conversation about how we might evaluate firms, because we are going out soon again, and we are looking forward to a new firm. And yeah, I do not want to go in here on all of those, from my point of view, inaccurate statements in terms of the history of events, and it's not worth the time, frankly. So.
So we have a time for public comments, but I would like to hold those off, please, until we discuss the RFP, the draft RFP.
Chair, I can't stay here much longer, so I would please let me make my statement. sir.
Yes, go ahead. Do you want to come up to the mic so that you're being recorded?
Thank you. Well, that is some backdrop to the statement I'm about to make. You have someone here who has inserted herself successfully on this committee contrary to ordinance, and I shall read what the ordinance says. The audit committee shall have 5 voting members, who are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. 2 members shall be city councilors. The city manager shall be a member of the committee with voice, non-voting. I repeat, the city manager shall be a member of the committee with voice, non-voting. Nowhere in that statement does it say or designate. Now, again, I will grossly misquote a famous line from a film, 1948, The Treasure of the Sierra Madres. Ordinances. We don't need no stinking ordinances. The city staff has always just viewed ordinances as a means of controlling the masses, the riffraff. Mr. City Attorney, is it legal for her to insert herself onto this committee? Tell her to leave, please. I mean, what are they going to do, Bob? Fire you?
Mr.
Please
Chairman?
go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'd say several things. First off, I thought that quote was from Cheech and Chong. No, it's actually 1948 film, Treasure of the Sierra Madres. Okay. Secondly, I would ask you all to compare the terms assistant city manager and deputy city manager. They are different terms with different meanings, and the difference is the answer to your question. An assistant city manager, for example, is a person who assists the city manager in the performance of the manager's duties. A deputy city manager, by definition, is a person who has the authority to sit in place of the city manager when the city manager is not present, can make city manager.
She has always maintained she is a designee. There's no question
Chairman.
she can maintain that.
Who's speaking?
No, I gotta leave. I just have to. I'll just keep going.
Mark, could you please close the door on your way out?
Sure.
Thank you.
So my answer would be that as a deputy city manager, Suzanne has the authority to sit as a city manager. But I think more than that, this is a public meeting, which anybody can be present at this meeting, any member of the public in the city or even outside the city. And since the position as described by Mr. Brighton doesn't carry with it a vote, being here is something that actually anybody in the entire city could be here, which certainly encompasses, among other things, a deputy city manager. So I don't see any objection to the presence of Suzanne here.
public comment, Chair?
Yes, we'll do one more public comment, then I want to get back to the agenda. Yep. Please.
May I address?
Yes, please.
Petra Huda, Portsmouth. To the city attorney's comments, I would like to finish reading the part of the ordinance here. Down 2 more sentences. The city manager, per what was previously said, the city manager shall be a member of the committee, voice non-voting. Audit committee members other than city councilors shall possess experience in finance, accounting, auditing, and financial management. All members shall be independent of both city management and any auditing firm which may be under contract with the city. So when you take that phrase in the ordinance into consideration, and you take into consideration the timing of the promotion to deputy city manager by previous Attorney Woodland, how would you respond to that, City Attorney Sullivan?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, should I?
Yes, please.
Essentially the same answer as before. This city manager is by charter as well as by inherent in the office, the ability to be involved in actually anything that the city does. It's the role of the manager, in fact, to be knowledgeable and involved in all the actions that the city takes. And I think that for the reasons I stated before, as well as what I just stated, it is entirely appropriate for Suzanne Woodland to be here, as it would be for the city manager to be here. Which is not to say I don't see your point. I do see your point. But I'm saying that the broader consideration is what I just said.
So, to your point, I would also like to make the point that the first meeting we had, the city manager was on vacation. There was no problem with having city, at that time, Attorney Woodland sit in. After that, we have never seen the city manager attend one of these meetings. We have never been given a reason. All we had was that Suzanne was going to be substituted in her place, which is not in the ordinance. So I guess I would disagree with your opinion
Yeah,
on
I'm
that.
unaware of why the manager wasn't here in other times, and I'm frankly unaware of why the manager is not here now, but I do know the manager is not here now. Deputy city manager is.
One more point I'd like to make before you move on to the other stuff. To be clear on the sealed minutes, at that time, I was the chair. There were 3 sets of sealed minutes that I witnessed and had to approve. It was June 11th, June 14th, and then the 29th. And I would also like to get on record that on the 29th minutes, I would disagree with anything that was confidential there. This was all staff discussion. This had nothing to do with anybody as far as confidential information that would have affected any other vendor. So I just want to note that disagreement to not opening the minutes to the public. I think the public should have been aware of what was discussed in there due to the fact that it was between the audit committee and staff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
So the city manager, as you might expect, has many responsibilities and many commitments, and we typically do divide up responsibilities, and this is my responsibility to handle this audit committee, and she does often check in terms of either she watches the meeting at a later time when she has more availability, or she checks in with the quick update. So I would say that she is very cognizant of what is occurring here. She is happy to have me continue to sit in her capacity. And it is certainly within her prerogative to decide how and what she puts her attention towards. And I think it would be absolutely wrong to assume that she is not committed to the good financial management of this city, as all of your staff is. And, you know, this is how we, you know, get our work done, which is we make decisions in terms of how we cover the various obligations and responsibilities that we have.
So I would just say, and I want to wrap this one part up. Frankly, what I find so offensive is that at no point did I receive, and I sent an email to City Manager Conard in December asking that we get off on the right foot and work in a positive effort together. At no point did I receive a response to that email or any sort of offer or explanation as to why she was simply not attending these meetings. And at no point did I receive a statement from her with an apology or an explanation as to why you were the one who was attending and became so directly involved in the committee's activities. So perhaps, since my communication with her doesn't seem to register, if you could please convey to her that I find her behavior in this regard offensive.
And I'm sure she will hear this statement, and I think I have made it clear for months now that I am sitting in her capacity to help manage the many obligations and responsibilities that we have. So I think we've been clear in trying to respond to this concern.
So let's move on to the discussion of the RFP, please. Jesse, are you still with us?
I am, Chairman Mike.
Thank you. So we have before us two draft RFPs, and this feels a little bit like deja vu all over again, hearkening back to December. But so we have the Audit Committee RFP, and we have Attorney or Deputy City Manager Woodland's RFP. And there are distinct differences, as I pointed out in my comment, between the two. And these are important differences, because they really go to the heart of trying to maintain an independent audit. And without that, then we're no longer following the city charter. So I think perhaps Attorney Woodland, if you could please answer a few questions that I have regarding your proposal.
Sure, I can try.
So perhaps you could tell me where in your edition the discussion of non-attest services is raised, and how is that being given equal consideration by the proposer to the audit work?
So the non-attest services are interwoven, if you will, within the scope of services that is requested. It is not specifically called out, as in the draft that you prepared, Mr. White. I think one of the things that we learned from our efforts last year is that there are cost benefits to keeping the two services combined when we can. And so this scope that we have really goes back to what the city has originally done, which is to get the efficiencies that we're looking for, both in terms of time, coordination, and financial benefits, is to keep the two interwoven. So we didn't call and tease them out separately as you did in your draft. So it's a single ask for both of those services. Again, we felt it was a learning process last year, and we benefited from hearing from the other applicant about the efficiencies that they saw, that they could manage the conflict. So we actually took it as fairly positive that the way we've been doing it to bundle both services from an efficiency point of view was indeed good, and we really just want to go out for new RFPs. So we just started actually with the base RFP that we'd done like a year ago, just to make it easier to get it out the door and get a draft before this committee. We promised the city council we'd get something out in August or September and something to this committee in July, and we wanted to meet that deadline.
So I compared, if I may, just compare that response to our addition, where we, in our cost grid, we specifically ask for what is your proposed cost for doing standalone non-attest, what is your cost standalone audit, and then what is your cost for combined. So that the economies of scale and scope that you talk about would certainly come out in that last grid box, but we would also get the detail of what the proposer would propose for standalone work for non-attest and audit. And in my opinion, that is a far more useful set of numbers. I'm financially driven, but that's a far more useful set of numbers than your homogenizing the process and putting everything together where you can't then tease out that detail.
And that was, I looked carefully at the spreadsheet. I think what the cost proposal form is the word I'm looking for. And my concern with the way you laid it out is it sounded like we would consider both, having two separate firms, which we would not want to do. We could consider whether to modify what the way we set up the cost proposal form to see if we can tease it out. But I think what we saw and kind of heard was that once you're doing both of those scopes of work together, it's so interrelated because they're using some of the same spreadsheets, I think, and stand up behind the scenes, if you will, in terms of doing that work, that's where the efficiencies come. So that's why we didn't tease it out. But I'm happy to have another conversation with purchasing whether to tease it out, but we would not consider two separate firms, not for this current, the next round of a 3-year contract, because we'd like to get a good contract, get it in place for 3 years, and really not have to revisit this. And particularly because we're assuming it's a new audit firm, we want them to be able to commit to standing up, getting settled, and doing work for 3 years, because we disagree that there is a cost, so to speak, to bringing in a new firm. You do have to give the new firm a lot more information that you have to restart with them. There's a lot of background information on your policies and, specific practices that are specific to this community. So there is work. So we want to do it once, and we want the firm to stick around and do good work for a couple of years. So.
Councilor Tabor.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to get Jesse's point of view on this. Jesse,
Yeah.
is it better for us to have one firm do non-attest and the audit? That would seem to be what we learned going through the process.
Yeah, so I think from our process, at least last year, it was more cost effective to have two firms doing it. One firm doing both. But I don't think it hurts to structure it the way Chairman White has structured it. So you're not missing anything. And maybe we decide to go separately at some point. So, so I would favor Chairman White's language. It's not a huge sticking point for me. And I also think Deputy City Manager Woodland's comments there are suggestions to the audit committee. And it really should be framed in a suggestive way, and it's really up to the audit committee, no matter who that is composed of, whether it's all city councils or members or a mix of private citizens and city council members. I think for me, the big difference between the two RFPs is Chairman White's establishes that there'll be one meeting, which is not a heavy lift for city council or the audit committee, with the auditor, absent city management during the audit process. And I think that's just a best practice, common sense step that we should have. I don't think the audit committee should be, involved on a day-to-day basis, weekly basis, but I think that is one common sense step that really helps with independence.
Go ahead.
Go, Councilor Taylor.
So Jesse, you're saying a good thing that the Chris White version establishes is a meeting between the whole council to hear the final audit, or?
At this point, I mean, given what's going on in the governance council right now, so my preference would be the audit committee and the auditor with the city council invited. If the city council decides they want to be as an official body involved, that's great too. But I think the audit committee should be there if it's still as private citizens.
So if I may add to that, question 17, page 33 of the blue book, and I'm not sure I've got my blue book with me, but clearly states that the auditors must have a forum in which the independent auditors can candidly discuss audit-related matters apart from management. I mean, that is an essential part of trying to encourage the independence of the audit. And to not have that be available, I think, is very problematic. It's what we wanted last year and didn't get. It's what we want this year.
And fundamentally, I agree with that. I'm a liberal arts major. I'm not a finance person. But when I've managed organizations, I've found that whoever supervises the administration or the staff, and that is the city council, needs to hear from the auditor in a, real let their hair down kind of environment where the auditor can say, these are the things we think need improvement, or these are the things that are perfect.
Right.
And I think the question then is that does the council have the audit committee do that, or is that solely a council responsibility? And I think that question gets into the governance issues that are on the table for Monday.
In the governance committee, but I think if you go to the GFOA booklet, it's very
Right.
clear that it's
No,
the audit committee that has that responsibility.
Yeah, and I think that booklet is very clear, that the elected body oversees the administration of the city, the staff of the city, and that oversight is theirs and theirs alone. So how do we have the auditor report to the council, and what's the best method to do that?
Well, it's through the audit committee. Now, how you constitute the audit committee, I know is a hot potato right now, but from what I tried to reflect to you in my comments, I am very concerned about the collusive aspect of city management and city councilors. I know that's a dirty word, but there needs to be a sense of independence in that audit committee independent from city management, and so they are clearly charged to report just to city council. And it's frankly, with all due respect, it's why I find it so irksome that the deputy city manager continues to be so involved, starting from the get-go last December, in this audit committee process. Because it meant that it was very difficult for us to establish a truly independent process, independent of the city. The city was present at every single step of the way. And it was, from my perspective as chair, it was a difficult process to manage. But, yes.
Keep in mind that this RFP document is simply submitting the proposals. So once you get the proposals in, as you'll recall, there is a process for negotiating the contract. So whether and to what extent the audit committee, however it may exist, when the proposals are open, there is an opportunity to decide at that point, you know, how the structure is, or the communication is going to work between the audit committee and the auditors. And I will say, it's been very clear, because I had to read so much with regard to audits and the requirements. It's very clear, if there is any material finding of concern, that the auditor's responsibility is to go to the governing body, not to management. I mean, it's so clear. And I think that is really where, I don't think there's been any violation, as I've said before, of the charter and the way we've been handling it. The city council has chosen the past auditors. The city management is fine with an audit committee within its proper scope and role. And so I just offer up to you, you don't necessarily have to solve everything now, because literally this is just the RFP, and it is the contract terms that are going to govern the actual communication channels for the new auditor, if that's helpful in kind of
So
taking
that's
this
fine,
conversation.
Deputy City Manager. But in point of fact, you have taken over the negotiations of the contract. Last year, prior to this fiscal year 22, we at least had some involvement as the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Audit Committee with helping you negotiate the contract. And I would submit that, in fact, comments I've heard from you, that you found our contributions to be helpful. This year, it's been crickets. And so, once again, it seems to me as if city management has taken over that process and excluded the audit committee. And I think I would submit to the detriment of the sense of independence and involvement of the audit committee. So, if I may, Jesse was very helpful in taking us to the role of the audit committee. The last point I wanted to make, the big difference, is this weighting concept in terms of how much is the cost considered. Last year we specified, and last year I know that in your edition, December 15, that you presented to us, that you took out the cost. You've done that again this year. We appealed to you to please put it back in, and we wanted a 30% weight in there, and you apparently considered it and changed your perspective. We're back now to square one, and I will appeal once again to please put that 30% weight in there. It's ironically, it's also what GFOA, our blue book, suggests, is a 30% weight consideration for cost. I think it is important on several points. Number one, it helps to structure the conversation by the audit committee. But number two, and more importantly, it's a market signal to the proposers as to what priorities we place on cost versus technical skills. And the audit committee, and I think CLA really took this to heart. The audit committee came up with the CLA came up with a much more creative and rigorous proposal because they knew that the audit committee was going to value that more than just simply the dollar amount. And so they loaded their staff with highly trained, CPA types, many more than what Melanson did. Now, maybe Melanson was focused more on cost, but they shouldn't have been. It was clear in the RFP what the weight was on cost. It was 30%. So I consider that to be a deficiency in Melanson's proposal, that they chose to ignore that aspect of the proposal. And so here we go again. You're wanting to take that 30% out. I say, please don't do it. It provides a structure and a rigor to the proposal that would otherwise be missing.
And I will say the only reason I took it out of this draft is recognizing that there may potentially be a change in the membership of the audit committee such that I did not want to hamstring any future committee in deciding how they wanted to weight those particular factors. So.
Well,
but
I also
I'm-
understand that the earth could stop spinning tonight. So before that happens, because you have to go through 3 readings of the ordinance to change it. Before that happens, we're operating as if this is the committee. And I'm asking you for this committee, not some future committee, to please put that 30% back in.
I'll take it under consideration.
Thank you. Yes.
I think, given how much we've just talked about it on the record, I don't think any bidders would have any doubt as to the importance of the qualitative factors.
Well, only if it's dropped entirely. If it's dropped entirely, then it's all no holds barred, and anything goes. And I think that is essentially a waste of our time. And I hope you would agree, Councillor Tabor.
I thought we had a good matrix this last time, as I've said.
I'm very proud of the work we did. And I think that we, if you'll excuse the phrase, we busted butt, and we were rigorous and thorough. And I think we came up with the point score reflected the fact, when considering all of us together, we scored the proposals properly, that CLA was significantly better than Melanson.
I would just add, if I could, the deputy city manager provided a lot of the hard work for that and did a good job. And I don't think we do ourselves favors when we talk about city staff in terms of I'm insulted or I'm offended. That doesn't do us any good.
Well, if that's a problem, then I would invite a city manager to have a conversation with me.
I will make sure that she's aware of that invitation.
Thank you. So, it's now 5 o'clock, and I'm wondering if we are at a place now where the audit committee can discern which of these 2 proposals it would recommend to City Council, or whether we need further discussion. Jesse, are you,
I am. What was your last, what did you say at the end there?
I'm sorry,
Whether we can vote?
Yes,
or whether
correct.
we end the discussion
correct.
and table a decision?
If we're not ready to vote, then we would have to meet again and talk further.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't view it as one or the other, right? I think they're both reasonable, and I'd be willing to work with other committee members to find the middle ground. I think, again, the big sticking point for me is that we put that independent meeting between the audit committee / city council and the auditor. Put that language in the RFP, especially considering all the debate and concern and back and forth we've had over the past 12 months. I think it just, it sends a good message. It's a common sense step.
Good.
But on the non-attest and audit services, I'm willing to move more towards what the city proposes. And then the cost issue, I do think, I'd probably prefer that number to be in there, but it doesn't have to be for me. But it sounds like the rest of the committee's not willing to do that at this point. I don't know, Councilor Tabor, did you have follow-up thoughts on the independent meeting or any of the other two issues?
I think conceptually, I'm on the same page as that the auditor reports back to the city council. I think because that's just the way, and the deputy city manager affirmed that quite clearly, that it's the council's task. There were, having gone through the two documents, the staff version has a more expedited schedule, and I think that makes sense for them. I think it makes sense if it were to switch auditors to give as much lead time as possible. So the chairman's version has a February 3 deadline for the proposals, and I think that gets us too late. It doesn't give staff enough time.
I'm certainly happy to bring that forward if that makes the difference.
Yeah. The staff proposal has a requirement that the auditors show past ability to meet deadlines, and I think that's important. If we get into hiring an auditor and it bogs down, that's problematic from the point of view of our bond issues. So I think earlier is better for the RFP process. I don't think we need to separate non-attest. I think we've learned that one firm should do both, particularly if we're going to do a 3-year commitment. I think it just makes sense. It's more efficient of everybody's time. And I think we came around to that in the end in this last process. So those are the issues on the table for me.
Good.
Mr. Furman?
Well, I'm in agreement with what you've proposed, and for good reasons. And, I think we need the independence, and we need to be recognized. We were created to do what we were doing, and now they're trying to take it away from us. So I don't quite understand it.
Thank you.
Could I ask a clarifying question? I thought I heard Jesse suggesting something different with regard to the meeting with the with the audit committee, which is I thought, Jesse, that you were suggesting that at the beginning of the engagement process, the audit firm would meet with the audit committee before the audit committee kind of gets going, so to speak, kind of like a pre-meet, like a organizational, meet the team. And I thought, Jesse, that you were suggesting that kind of meeting, not just one at the end, which typically happens where the auditors come in and report to the city council. Did I hear you wrong?
Yeah, so what I was suggesting is an interim meeting before the final report. And after the auditors, a progress report directly
Okay.
To the audit committee or the city council.
So, what I'd like to suggest is that, and I would ask Jesse and Councilor Tabor and myself to, by phone, sit down and try to work out these differences and come up with an addition that the audit committee is happy with.
Well, the city attorney could speak to it, but you have a quorum problem.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, so then why
You
don't,
have to find a way to do this that the public could listen in.
I'm sorry?
You have to find a way to do that the public could listen into your discussion.
I see. Well, so I would ask then that Jesse and Counselor Tabor, Mr. Lynch and Counselor Tabor, work out these differences and then come back in an addition, a subsequent meeting to the audit committee to report on their refined version of the RFP.
I'd like to have somebody from city staff there too, because they'll run the process.
I would actually rather not have city staff there. That's part of the issue. The city staff will have input once we come up with the revised version.
I think we're always smart to as the committee, outline what we would like to see in a document and then have staff develop it. It may be smarter for us to work this out as a full committee and go through that process, as Bob says, in public, which would mean scheduling another meeting for this, so that all of us here can be present.
Does the chair have to be physically present?
The chair does not have to be physically present, although a quorum of the committee has to be physically present.
So, given your reticence, then what I will ask is that we have we table this for a future meeting sometime in the next week to have an open discussion, a public meeting to work out these differences. That's
I would make a motion to table this for further discussion and by the full committee.
pardon me,
By the full committee.
do I get a second?
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Right.
One problem might be that without a time certain,
For meeting?
right, what I suggest that you add to that the meeting be held at the call of the chair, so that you can determine the time of the next
Thank-
meeting.
thank you.
I'm willing to accept that amendment.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
So it's going to be Sunday at 3 in the afternoon. Okay, well, on that note of humor, I would like to now invite public comment, knowing that it's 10 after 5. But please feel free, and I very much value everyone's patience as we see sausage being made.
That's okay, and I think it was good to see it. Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. And I just have some points of comment that I heard tonight, or today. And first of all, you need to know that I just spent hours preparing for an audit for a $21 million budget. And so I live this. And I don't have as an administrator, I don't have any involvement in any of the RFPs or any of that stuff. With that said, I heard a comment by Counselor Tabor that kind of took me back a little bit. And the comment was about Counselor White and talking ahead of time. And yet, I remember our city official, City Attorney Woodland at the time, talking to Mullinson quite often about non-contested services, about other things. So I guess if we're gonna look at one entity, we have to look at both. And I'm a little taken back, even in the December meeting, I looked last night to make sure it was not public or non-public, and it wasn't, it was public. The comments that were being made about the conversations that were happening with Mullinson by our city. And so I was appalled at that, and I still am. I think one of the things, I guess I'm kind of sad that the governor's committee wants to attack this committee. So I have to ask myself, we have 3 citizens who have no gain from this, no financial gain from this, who are constantly being attacked by the council over the fact that they want to have transparency, they want to have a say in the RFP that I feel is pretty simple. The things I just heard, the 3 items, I would think they would be really easy to compromise on. I agree with the 30% in there so that you can really look at the quality of people and maybe even the quantity, because I know for myself, when I have an auditing firm that brings 10 people in that are highly qualified, it takes a lot less of my time. They are a lot less questions, and instead of a 2-week audit, we have a week audit. So I know there's some real benefits to the city for having a firm that's high quality, or maybe even have more people involved. So personally, I think that should be almost 80% of what you're looking at, and the cost should be 20%, because I think the quality of the people and the number of people doing the audit is significant. The other thing I'm a little concerned is, I'm not sure why the city, and I've watched this now for almost 2 years and then plus another 10 years, has to be so intrusive in the audit. I heard tonight or today that it's time consuming to the city, and I can tell you for myself, it is time consuming. But I don't care what year the audit is, I still have to pull all the policies, because policies are changing all the time. I still have to pull all the governance of our school board. I still have to pull all that stuff. So if the audit's being done appropriately, then that stuff is looked at yearly. That stuff is all part of the audit, all your procedures. You know, I guess I also was a little taken back that if we have an auditing firm that's going to be subjective, to hear from the city, well, we want them to know how we do things. That shouldn't be the way it is. An auditing firm should come in with their own practices that are run by federal and state laws. And whether it's grants, whether it is day-to-day general funds, that shouldn't make the difference of what the city thinks or what the city's procedures are or what how the city thinks. I mean, that is corrupt. You know, that is inappropriate. So I guess I'm really taken back of why I keep hearing today by our council, we even want to get rid of this committee. What I like is that you're willing to meet with the auditor. You want the citizens, the 3 citizens, plus the council, invite all the other councilors, and meet with the audit after the audit has been complete, and talk about it, and what did they see. You know, I don't understand, again, why we're worried about the 30%. Why don't we have it in there? Because I think that should be a big part of it. And also, I can't believe that our own business department doesn't want that. Because if I have all these people coming in of high quality, then that audit's going to get done a lot quicker. So I can't believe that the finance department wouldn't want that anyway. So I guess I'm a little taken back by that. So I would encourage you to start working together instead of saying wait until the governance committee Monday, which was what we said today. I would encourage you to be transparent. I would encourage you all to really think about the city of Portsmouth and the finances. And I think it's about time that we had citizens that have a background and can be part of it. You know, I again reflect on my own. And audits are not easy to any entity. They're a lot of work. But they are something that we owe our citizens to have the best company, the best people, to review how we're spending their funds. And 20 years of having the same auditor, maybe 22 or 23, whatever it is right now, is wrong. And the fact that we got bamboozled in December, and the fact that we were told that Mollison was called and Mollison was looked into and blah, 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 is wrong. It should have been a pure RFP that went out, and that's what I'm asking you all to do now. Put a pure RFP out, and if it's a perfect RFP, then it shouldn't matter who is on the other end when they come and tell you how the city is being run financially. It should make a difference. Whether you have citizens there, because it should be public, I would assume. Whether you have council there, whether you have an audit committee there, whether you have city staff there, in the end. But it's a city staff that's in between. It's a city staff that's involved during the process that shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be the decision. I'll be honest with you. You should be deciding an RFP among your group of members, two councilors and 3 members, and then you should be giving that RFP to the city to put out. That's the way it should be run. And I can tell you that's the way it's run in many organizations and the one I live in. So thank you. Thank you for all your work, everyone.
Thank you, Esther.
Name is Roy Helsel. I've been in a lot of audits in the military and civilian, and the outfit that was being audited never drew the lines of telling them how to do it. And I've never seen this. There's not a city in this state, probably not in the country, that had an auditor for over 3 or 4 years. Usually 5 years is the maximum. And having an same auditors, it's wrong, and it sure looks bad to us citizens that they're hiding something or something like that. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Roy. Any other comments? Teacher.
Peter Huda, 280 South Street. I guess first I'd just like to remind everyone the purpose of this, the reason we're here, and the help that this gives and the consideration that the council should be taking on this. This is a universal citation of the purpose of an audit. Financial audits play a fundamentally vital role in helping to preserve the integrity of public finance functions and maintaining citizens' confidence in their elected officials. Properly performed audits provide independent assurance that financial information is presented reliable. So that's the whole basis on which everything is presented here. The next thing I guess I'd like to discuss, and I'd like to make some comments, and I'm glad you didn't vote, because I had some comments on the comparison between the two RFPs. I would, as a financial professional with over 40 years' experience and quite a bit in audit, I would prefer the cost proposal presented by Chair White. My reasoning is I think this opens up more opportunity for the city to choose. This gives the city a choice between choosing just somebody to do the non-attest, somebody to do both of them, or somebody to do just the audit. It also gives you a break and an independence here. The main thing here, it also closes the door to any staff involvement in this. If it's stated previously and it's represented to any proposer who is out there, they know what they're getting into. They know what they're proposing for. I would also like to address the statement made by Deputy City Manager Woodland, and saying that there's still an opportunity to change anything in the contract. when you put out an RFP, you're representing to all of the proposers, all of the anybody who's looking at the cost of these services and what they have to do to perform these services, that this is what your request is, these are your criteria to be judged, that they're going to be judged against. And technical at 70% and cost at 30%, which, by the way, in looking at various other proposals for audit around the state, Derry, Manchester, Nashua, most of them follow the GFOA, which is 70-30. So in looking at how to divide that up, I strongly suggest that you put that back in. It also helps to guide anybody who's looking at this, whether they be financially oriented or not, a guideline to say, we can check this off. They met this, they met this, they met this. Oh, they don't meet this. Oh, let's compare company A to company B. They have CPAs doing the non-attest services. They have none. They have 3 principals. They have 1. It's very obvious then how the grading should go. And I think it's very helpful. I made this representation last time this was brought up. And I think the idea here to just have one do the non-attest and the audit, I think it locks the city into doing the same old thing. I think the opportunity to have somebody else look at this is and hold the independence of another firm away from the firm that's actually auditing. If the numbers work, it's great. Plus, the more opportunity this committee has to look at different firms, the more knowledge you will garner going forward. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Paige.
Thank you. An audit, Page Trace, 27 Hancock Street. Sorry, I forgot. An audit committee is one of the most vital functions in city and a healthy city, a financially healthy city. An audit is also supposed to be independent. This means that Councilor Tabor staff works for you. But Councilor Tabor, as a resident now, you work for me. You work for every person in this room. You actually work for Chris White. And I know you to be an honorable man. I assume that this city's finances are on the up and up as a resident. I would expect, whether it's CLA or Mendelson or whoever it is, that the audit will come out clean. But I have great concern and I have great curiosity. Deputy City Manager Woodland, I know you. And I ask you, I implore you to step back from what this committee is trying to do and allow them to do it independently. It's a mix of counselors and citizens. Let this city show to an independent auditor from an independent RFP that we are clean financially as a city, that we don't have anything that we're hiding. Really. And Mendelson, 23 years now? 22?
27.
27 years. There isn't an organization that I know of, that I've ever been involved with, that doesn't have term limits for its boards, its officers, its executive boards. Term limits are a good thing. They're healthy. You get too sort of laid back and happy and casual. After 27 years, dear God, even Rip Van Winkle is still probably asleep and would finally wake up and go, oh, we're still here. It's Mendelson. Yippee. So I'm saying, come on. You have nothing to hide. The city manager has nothing to hide. The city attorney has nothing to hide. So instead of digging in your heels and saying, we're going to control this, let the audit committee of non-staff, non-council experts, financial experts, let them do their job. Give them a little room, give them a little range, and make suggestions, not comments. Don't tell them what they have to do. Let them come to you and ask. And that goes for both counselors and experts. Maybe Mr. White, Chairman White, actually knows what he's talking about. Heaven help us. I know him to be brilliant and honorable. Let him be that way. And thank you for doing what you do as staff and you as council. And let's keep this moving forward independently. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. Any other comments? Hearing none. It's just about 5:30, and I appreciate all of the patience demonstrated this afternoon. I don't see Jesse. Jesse, are you still there?
Gone.
Looks like he dropped off.
Okay. So I need a motion, please, to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?